On January 30th, Bloomberg, the Financial Times, Reuters, and some other media first reported that the U.S. government had notified American companies that it would no longer issue export licenses to Huawei. This is a step toward a total ban on the sale of U.S. technology to Huawei. A source familiar with the matter told Reuters that U.S. officials are working on a new and official policy. The policy will prohibit shipping items to Huawei, including items below the 5G level, like 4G items, Wi-Fi 6 and 7 goods, artificial intelligence, and commodities and technologies such as high-performance computing and cloud projects. On the supplier side, all direct business dealings between American companies and Huawei, including chip giants Intel and Qualcomm, will be completely cut off. Not only that, but other companies and intermediaries that supply Huawei are also prohibited from being exported to by U.S. companies. This is a sweeping escalation of the U.S. government's export ban on Huawei. Some technology experts describe it as a truly significant move. Beijing seems unable to do much other than protest.
China expresses serious concern about the relevant report, and we are closely following the relevant developments. China firmly opposes the U.S. generalizing the notion of national security and abusing state power to unreasonably suppress Chinese companies. This practice violates the principles of market economy and international economic and trade rules, and hurts the confidence of the international community in the U.S. business environment. It is a blatant technological hegemony. China will continue to firmly safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies.
In the recent past, the Trump administration had put Huawei on the export blacklist in 2019, but made exceptions for some American companies, including Qualcomm and Intel, which received licenses to give Huawei non-5G technology. The Biden administration has taken more aggressive measures than its predecessor, and now appears to be pushing toward a total ban on all technology exports from Huawei. A technology expert at think tank CNAS told the Financial Times that the latest move is a really significant one. He said Huawei's venture into new areas over the past few years, such as developing submarine cables and cloud computing, has raised new national security concerns. If the new ban goes into effect, how will it affect Huawei? What restrictions will be placed on the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP? Several sources have revealed that the CCP arrested 2 Canadian citizens to force the release of Huawei's financial director, Meng Wanzhou, and the US, Canada, and China began secret prisoner exchange negotiations. It was reported that top Chinese leader Xi Jinping issued more than 100 directives and personally discussed the prisoner exchange with 2 successive US presidents, and after 3 years of efforts, an agreement was finally reached. That is to say, in order to save Huawei, the CCP has done its best, but now it seems to be all in vain. A series of recent US actions have dealt a huge blow to the CCP's high-tech and chip industries. In October 2022, the Biden administration unilaterally imposed new chip manufacturing equipment export restrictions on China, including controls on exports of advanced computing integrated circuits and certain semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Now the U.S. government is stepping up its efforts to work with allies to halt the CCP's ambitions to develop semiconductor technology for artificial intelligence and hypersonic weapons. The U.S. has recently reached a trilateral agreement with Japan and the Netherlands that would impose restrictions on the export of certain chip-making equipment to China by companies in those countries. Given such context, Huawei won't be able to get chips from Intel and Qualcomm in the future. Currently, Intel and Advanced Micro Devices Incorporated supply Huawei with the processors used in the Mate series of laptops, while Qualcomm sells processors and modems to Huawei, which are core components of Huawei's smartphone line. According to a Bloomberg supply chain analysis, Huawei now accounts for less than 1% of the revenues of Qualcomm, Intel, and Advanced Micro Devices, highlighting Huawei's declining importance. If these core technologies aren't available at all, Huawei, the technology giant, will be gone for good. Huawei seems to have sensed the wind in advance. On February 4, 2023, news spread on the Chinese network that more than 10,000 people had been fired from Huawei.
10,000 people were dismissed from Huawei. Yes, you heard it right. Recently, Ren Zhengfei requires that all employees who have worked for more than 8 years be dismissed and reapply for the job. The labor law stipulates that as long as the employee has been with the company for 10 years, he or she will become a permanent employee. That is to say, the company has to take care of this employee for a lifetime. According to the current recruiting standards of Huawei, the one who can be rehired will come in, and the one who can't come in can only say goodbye. If you can't be rehired and you are a shareholder of the company, since Huawei gives shares to old employees, sorry, your shares will be converted to cash. Take your money and leave. Huawei doesn't bother with redundant people.
Founded in 1987 by Ren Zhengfei, a former major in the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, Huawei was once a big hit in China. It was in August 2022 that the world got a glimpse of Huawei's significant change. At the time, Chinese media outlet China Business Network reported that in its internal forum, Huawei posted an article with the headline, "The entire company's business approach should shift from the pursuit of scale to the pursuit of profit and cash flow." On the same day, the phrase, "Huawei wants to make survival its main agenda," became the number 1 and number 2 trending items on the hot searches on Weibo, China's social media platform. In the article, Ren said that the global economy is facing a recession and declining in spending power. It's unlikely to turn around in the next 3 to 5 years. With the impact of the epidemic, there should not be a single region in the world that is considered a bright exception. Huawei should change its thinking and business policy from pursuing scale to pursuing profit and cash flow to ensure it can survive the crisis in the next 3 years. The main agenda is to stay alive and to shrink and shut down all marginal businesses. Everyone needs to feel the chill, he said. According to Ren, the founder of Huawei, in 2023, the company will shrink or close down businesses that won't generate value and profits in the next few years. He said, "Go where the money is and make some, and completely abandon some countries or markets." This statement is a surprise to the related industries in China. In the past, Huawei hardly emphasized profits. It's the leading technology company of the CCP and has always enjoyed special privileges from the government in terms of policy and funding. With the Chinese government's financial support, Huawei has grown to be massive, with 180,000 employees worldwide by 2022. In the past, Huawei never had to think much about operations and profits, but only about how to dominate the market with low-price products and how to expand Huawei products and services to more countries. In order to get more orders, Huawei's products and services were priced very low, even below cost. Huawei didn't have the problem of losing money because they were subsidized by the CCP. So Huawei's scale grew with more employees, and its cell phones were once number 1 in the world. The emphasis on profitability and profits, shrinking market share, and layoffs aren't what Huawei used to do. This change indicates that the CCP may no longer provide subsidies to Huawei or less subsidies. There are 2 reasons for this. One is that Huawei's core value to the CCP has diminished. The second is that the Chinese government is really running out of money in the economic recession. It's like Huawei is facing the pain of weaning, but this isn't the hardest part. The hardest part is that Huawei's supply chain has been cut off, as we explained earlier, and the most crucial chip is no longer available. But who can they blame? In late January, Bloomberg, the Financial Times, Reuters, and others reported that Huawei, a nominally private company, had conducted at least 10 studies with various Communist Party military organizations, including on the topics of artificial intelligence and radio communications. It had also worked with the National University of Defense Science and Technology to explore methods for collecting and analyzing satellite imagery and geographic coordinates. According to research, the earliest paper published by Huawei employees in collaboration with the CCP military dates back to 2006, and a search of the database shows that at least 10 papers have been published by both sides. These published projects represent only a small fraction of the total, and many aren't made public because they involve military secrets. In other words, Huawei, as the leading technology company fostered by the CCP government, is not only responsible for the CCP's technological development and innovation, but also has a close relationship with the CCP military. The Chinese government's national intelligence law, which took effect in 2017, requires Chinese companies to support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence efforts regardless of where they operate. In recent years, Huawei has been pursuing a strategy to position itself as a major global provider for telecommunications equipment. Huawei attempted to dominate the communications infrastructure in key international digital systems in various regions of the world. Its most notable achievement was the 5G wireless communication system, which can connect to mobile phones, the Internet, and the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things can link virtually any digital device, such as automated garage doors, and 5G can also control the supervisory control and data acquisition systems of dam gates or nuclear power station grid connections. Huawei wanted to provide hardware and enterprise technology support for its products, meaning it wanted its employees to have access to these systems. Over the past few years, there has been growing evidence that Huawei equipment has backdoors to steal information from other countries and access vital intelligence. In this century, cyber attacks and hacking have become commonplace. Imagine the power of a modern Trojan horse. The CCP could use these pseudo-civilian systems to launch an attack on the cyber like another Pearl Harbor against an adversary who uses Huawei's equipment. The attack could damage the adversary's economy by, for example, shutting down banks. If carried out quickly and widely, a sneak attack could disrupt military communications and disable high-tech sensors. How has the West come to form an alliance to block Huawei? In August 2018, Australia announced that it had banned Huawei from building a 5G network in its country due to security concerns. The Australian government said that the involvement of a company that may be under additional direction from a foreign government in the construction of Australia's national network posed too great a risk. Australia's formal ban on Huawei is the first of its kind in any country. Although the US banned the use of Huawei network equipment in 2012, it wasn't until May 2019 that the Bureau of Industry and Security of the US Department of Commerce officially added Huawei to its list of entities. A year later, Trump extended the sanction to 2021. In fact, Huawei kept itself so secretive that many countries initially didn't believe the company was anything special. That included even the UK, a member of the Five Eyes Alliance. If not for the pressure from the US, Huawei would likely have successfully laid out 5G in the UK. The then Johnson government said in January 2020 that it would allow Huawei to participate in 5G construction on a limited basis. But by July that year, Johnson decided to ban and remove Huawei 5G equipment. Why did the Johnson administration make a 180-degree turn just 6 months apart? In August 2022, The Times reported that Huawei's cheap equipment was a lethal temptation for the UK. The Trump administration put pressure on the UK by citing national security threats. In May 2019, Matthew Pottinger, the then Deputy National Security Advisor, led a White House delegation to London to lobby the UK. According to the media, Pottinger repeatedly stated, "We don't want you to do this. You don't know how evil the Chinese Communist Party is." With no success in persuasion, President Trump used his ultimate weapon. In May 2020, the US banned Huawei from using chips made in the US. By July, the UK's Prime Minister Johnson had completely changed course, announcing that all Huawei equipment would have to be stripped from the UK's 5G network, despite what the government estimated would be a delay in the rollout of the technology and an additional $5 billion in costs. For its neighbor, Canada, the US is even more concerned. Canada's delay in banning Huawei may be related to the CCP's abduction of 2 Canadian hostages. In September 2021, the US reached a deferred prosecution agreement with Meng Wanzhou, allowing her to return to China. The Chinese government then released the 2 Canadians. In May 2022, the Trudeau government announced a ban on the inclusion of Huawei and ZTE products and services in Canada's telecommunications system. After Huawei was blocked by the US and other members of the Five Eyes Alliance, in Europe, however, it continued to be accepted by Germany, Spain, and Hungary. In 2019, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Europe twice, and one of his main tasks was to persuade European countries to give up using Huawei. In 2020 and 2021, European governments including France, Sweden, Romania, the Baltic states, Belgium, and Denmark had either banned the use of Huawei equipment in key parts of their 5G networks or required their operators to stop using Huawei equipment in the medium term. Huawei's smartphone business, which once challenged Apple and Samsung in Europe, was also crushed by the US during this period. The American sanctions cut off its devices from Android, the operating system owned by Google. With President Biden in office and his seemingly mild stance towards the CCP, Huawei thought it had a chance to make a comeback in Europe. In early 2021, Huawei's lobbyists in Brussels were optimistic that Europe's desire for cheap, fast 5G installations would trump security concerns. They even held meetings in the European Parliament to make their case. These meetings were cancelled on February 24th, the same day Russian President Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. For many people in Europe, the risk of using Huawei equipment has suddenly escalated. Little did the Xi Jinping administration expect that Biden's rise to power would continue the Trump administration's sanctions against Huawei with even greater intensity in terms of joining hands with the US allies. In October 2021, the European Commission issued a new warning against the use of Huawei technology for 5G networks, and the UK government reiterated its request to strip Huawei equipment from its national telecommunications infrastructure. On November 25, 2022, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, issued a new rule banning the import or sale of communications equipment products from a number of Chinese companies, including Huawei and ZTE. A week later, on December 1st, according to a strategy paper seen by Reuters, the German Economy Ministry detailed proposals to increase the level of scrutiny on the use of components from certain countries, excluding components from suppliers of autocratic states and critical infrastructure, and imposing stricter requirements on companies dealing with China. Finally, let's take a look at what happened to Huawei's mobile phones in Taiwan. Huawei labeled its handsets as made in Taiwan, China, and was banned by Taiwan, that is, the Republic of China's National Communications Commission. As a result, Huawei has shifted its focus in Taiwan to wearable devices and laptops in recent years, and it hasn't released any new products in the mobile phone market for years. Because Huawei has encountered various kinds of siege and blockade from the US and its allies, Huawei's various products have faded from the Taiwan market. Recently, Huawei's Taiwan distributor announced that it would close its related repair centers from March 12, 2023. Users can make appointments for home service or go to authorized stores.